celebrating the fact that we're together. So after a few tumultuous years of COVID and health issues and all the rest of it, we're just thrilled to be here. And thank you so much to Deborah and Richard for hosting, and for Jay and for being the managers of this fabulous program. We really appreciate it. They are truly a marvel, all of them. So the idea of talking about Sea Ranch occurred to me after a joyous visit there in May of 2021. This was on the invitation of Dolores Jones, Catherine Huff's sister, Catherine sitting back there, and with a group of rambunctious women, including one sitting down there, we descended on the generous homeowners there. To say I'm smitten by Sea Ranch is completely a gross understatement. I find it to be the most magical place. This sublime place has been studied and taught to generations of landscape architects, and ecologists, and influenced environmental planning around the world. I'm sure there are many of you in the audience tonight that have studied Sea Ranch in architecture school. Let me see who has. Then I'll get really scared. Okay. All right. So this 10-mile stretch of undeveloped land on the California coast, 100 miles north of San Francisco, caught the eye of architect and developer Al Boke. His previous projects included Newtown in Hawaii for Castle and Cooke, and he purchased the Sea Ranch property in 1963. In this former sheep ranch named Rancho Del Mar, Boke saw this 1-mile strip of prime coastal land as an excellent opportunity to build a new community with outstanding architecture, yet with full respect for the landscape and the natural environment. Boke chose landscape architect Larry Halprin to design the master plan, respecting the existing structures on the land while preserving open space became their mantra. The team, seen here with Boke in the center and Larry on the right, laid out the site plan for the community. Boke took several real estate risks by building model homes and condominiums, and at the same time preserving the natural landscape. The condominiums went on the market in July of 1965. By December of that year, all but 2 had been sold. That's quite a remarkable achievement. Before Larry and his wife Anna arrived at Sea Ranch, we need a little background on how they landed there. Larry was born in Brooklyn in 1916, and in 1929 his family spent a year in Israel, where he celebrated his bar mitzvah. After high school, from 1933 to 35, Larry lived in Israel and spent time living at Ein Hashavat Kibbutz. Ein Hashavat translates literally as Spring of the Judge, named for Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, the first Jew to hold the position, and he had a leading role in the American Zionist movement. The kibbutz's founders stayed for 5 years in Hadera, where the group was created by joining 2 Hashomer Hatzar groups, one from Poland and one from North America. The group from North America was the first kibbutz of North American pioneers, that is, an aliyah. Living on the kibbutz profoundly influenced Halprin's sense of community. In 1939, he received a BA from Cornell in plant science and enrolled in the University of Wisconsin to study horticulture. There he met Anna, who was studying dance, and they married in 1940. On her suggestion, they visited Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin East, where he met Frank Lloyd Wright and was awed by the building and the cultural environment there. This sparked his interest in architecture and landscape architecture. He found Christopher Tunard's Gardens in the Modern Landscape in the library. On the recommendation of his professor, he received a scholarship to Harvard Graduate School of Design, where Gropius, Breuer, Tunard were teaching, and Dan Kiley and Garrett Ekbo were students at the time. So quite an environment. With the U.S. entering World War II, Halpern enlisted in the Navy. Here is Halpern's drawing of his ship, with sailors relaxing in 1943. However, in 1945, during the Battle of Okinawa, which was April 1st to June 22nd, a kamikaze plane hit his destroyer, the USS Morris. He was put on survivor's leave in San Francisco, where he secured a job at Thomas Church's landscape architecture practice, recommended by William Worcester, who he knew from Harvard. He worked on Church's Donnell Garden project, one of the landmarks of modern landscape design. Although he was asked to join the firm, in 1949 he chose to open his own office in San Francisco. He designed several landscapes of private homes. Then by the mid-60s, he completed Sproul Plaza at UC Berkeley, Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco, and the master landscaping plan for the World's Fair in Seattle. When Halpern was selected to design the site plan at Sea Ranch, he was the guiding force of the plan and the team. His preferred way of working was watercolor drawings that graphically illustrated his ideas. Here he demonstrated the narrow nature of the Sea Ranch property, bound by the ocean to the west, the town of Galala to the north, and the river to the east, with the ribbon of the highway west of the forest ridge. The team viewed the property from the air. As Halpern said, his goal was, quote, to inhabit this land and protect the awesome character without softening or altering it, end of quote. 50% of the land was to be reserved for open space and held in common. Environmental concerns were primary in laying out the site. Halpern began his study by walking the entire 10-mile stretch. He created his diagram, or eco-score, as he called it, which is in this slide, which combines climate, vegetation, animal, and human cultures in a timeline. From the early Native Americans to loggers to sheep farmers, each era had an impact on the land. Halpern clearly demonstrates his intense study of history and the dynamic interaction of social and ecological processes. In this drawing, Halpern indicates how the houses would be set away from the coastal edge and aligned with the trees as windbreaks. Monterey cypress hedgerows planted by ranchers perpendicular to the coast acted as windbreaks and were a character-defining feature of the landscape. Ultimately, an astounding additional 50,000 trees would be planted. Known as the Brigantine hedgerow, these trees are reaching the end of their lifespan. However, the Sea Ranch Landscape Committee monitors them closely, planting new trees to replace them. The houses were aligned perpendicular to the coast to maintain open grass meadows and views. With sketches like this one, Halpern showed how the houses needed to be aligned in concert with the windbreaks as a buffer for the strong prevailing winds. The existing wood barns and stake fences on the property provided the vernacular reference point for the architects imagining the new structures. The architects responsible for the design of the condominiums, the Sea Ranch Lodge, and a recreation center included Charles Moore, Donlan Linden, William Turnbull, and Richard Whitaker. The firm, known as MLTW, were all Berkeley architecture professors and worked together from 1962 to 70. They then pursued teaching at numerous universities. They had a huge impact on the profession. The condominium stepped down the hillside with slanted roof lines to buffer the wind. The architect shared the vision of designing in a simple vocabulary with rustic materials in keeping with the vernacular architecture and history of the land. They described it as, quote, at once a castle, compound, and promontory. It is a concentration of dwellings bunched together in the teeth of the wind, end of quote. This is one of the most remarkable aspects of Sea Ranch, the collaboration and agreement of these talented individuals to preserve the character of the natural environment. Condominium 1 set the tone for subsequent designs, sloping roof lines, vertical siding, and window projections. It garnered architecture awards and was hugely influential. Joseph Esherick designed the hedgerow houses nestled against the trees at Black Point Reach. The hedgerows create a backdrop or a backbone for locating the houses perpendicular to the shoreline. An open meadow surrounds the view-facing facade. Esherick designed the Sea Ranch Lodge, including the general store and restaurant, as well as the hedgerow houses like this one. The interiors with wood paneling, timber posts, and window seating with extensive glass panels allow each homeowner spectacular views. Their challenge was to demonstrate that people can inhabit a beautiful and fragile land along a wild stretch of the California coast without destroying it. Adherence to their original architectural and design concepts resulted in the evolution of an intentional community, one that is unique on the California coast, if not the world. Halpern found drawing to be the most productive way to note and develop his ideas. He did hundreds of drawings of the Sea Ranch property. Halpern identified Sea Ranch principles, emphasizing its natural, rural, non-elitist character. Any aspects of typical suburbia were completely forbidden. A design committee was established to review all projects to determine their compliance with these principles. Halpern was often asked about his early experience on the kibbutz in Israel and what influence it had on his work, and this is what he said.
Big way for people to live together. And that part of it influenced me profoundly, and has influenced me all my life. Sometimes people ask me about Sea Ranch. Did that emerge from my experience on the kibbutz? Yes, it did. But again, it's like all these questions about form. Are you copying art with your form? Are you copying the kibbutz in Sea Ranch? You know, that's nonsense. What I've been influenced by is the basic quality of the experience, and then I can transfer it to some new experience of mine. And that's what the influence of the kibbutz was at the Sea Ranch, you see. And if somebody asked me, did the Sea Ranch emerge from the kibbutz, I would say, no. But if they said, well, you influenced in the design of the Sea Ranch, I would say, absolutely. You see the difference? That's an important difference for me, even not only on a social level, but also on an art level.
Love to see that video of him actually speaking about that experience. This site plan is an aerial view of the tennis court and pool area, indicating how they are surrounded by elevated berms to set them down out of the wind. The vast open spaces, meadows, and paths make walking along the coast accessible to all Sea Ranchers. Half the property is held in common by Sea Ranch owners. The majestic and private coves with tidal pools and rocky beaches offer constantly changing ocean views. This existing barn is massive and simple, as if it belongs in the landscape. Now named a Nipstengel Barn, it is used for meetings, films, and as a theater for the Sea Ranch Performing Arts Group. The barn is on the National Register of Historic Places. Tucking the houses next to the windbreaks preserved open meadow for all to enjoy. Multiple publications featured articles on Sea Ranch. Progressive Architecture wrote that Sea Ranch is an example of dynamic conservation, where respect for the environment and human dwellings coexist. Each home has an unobstructed view of the ocean and expansive meadows that often offer open space and walking paths. The meadows are held in common, and private gardens are enclosed next to the houses and not visible from the meadows. Touting Sea Ranch as, quote, the most unusual second home colony ever conceived by nature and man, the Wall Street Journal identified the development as unusual and special. Noting, quote, the paradoxical presence of the condominium, essentially apartment houses living on the enormous site, makes the point of the newborn project, which will preserve as much of the natural landscape as possible for common use instead of chopping it all up into building blocks, end of quote. This was not only revolutionary, but prescient. There are 2,400 home sites and 1,800 have been built so far. Site plans and photos of Joseph Esherick's hedgerow houses were published widely. Along with Halpern and the architects, an important member of the team was the graphic designer Barbara Stoffaker Solomon. Known as Bobby, she designed the distinctive logo for Sea Ranch, seen here on the entry marker. Bobby's bold design of the sheep's horn enclosing seashells became widely recognized. She studied graphic design in Basel, Switzerland with Armin Hoffman, and on her return to San Francisco, set up her studio in the same building as Halpern. He brought her onto the project. The men and women's changing rooms in the Moonraker Athletic Center needed brightening. Bobby, a former dancer, laid out the bold graphics in 3 days, and 2 sign painters applied the stunning colors. Asked later for her preparatory drawings, she said she had none. Her design work became known as supergraphics. In March 1967, Progressive Architecture featured her work on the cover. Each of the principal architects were offered their choice of a lot on which to build their house. Halpern chose 5 acres overlooking a rocky cove and worked with Moore and Turnbull on their cabin. The house is sited a distance from the road with a surrounding meadow. Cantilevering over the rocks, the deck surrounds the house on the south and west. In this drawing, Halpern names the rocks: Tower Rock, Lion Rock, Performance Rock, and the rock for fishing. With arrows, he indicates the path of seals to the open sea. In green, he shows the path from the cabin. Drawing and watercolor were an essential tool for his understanding of the environment. Views from the interior to the cove and the sea beyond. Anna Halpern conducted dance workshops on the beach. This was the 60s, after all. Dance Magazine recognized her work. Dancers and architects create a driftwood city in a kinetic study of environment. For both Anna and Larry, living close to the land was key to both their practices. Quote, Anna and I have had an enormous effect on each other. I'm a tremendous believer in her choreography and what it stands for. For several years, Halpern conducted workshops with sea ranchers to discuss important issues on the continuing development of the property. Here he is 1968 with daughter Daria behind him. The Sea Ranch Archives Committee plans to reinstate the workshops next year. In recent years, there have been numerous changes to the demographics of the homeowners, particularly since COVID. Younger families located and worked remotely. Consequently, real estate values have skyrocketed. Educating the newer arrivals on Sea Ranch principles is the committee's goal. In 1979, Halpern, working with Turnbull, built a studio on the property. He used the sheep horn symbol as an H for his name, which I think is an indication of how close he was to this project and what it meant to him. In 2001, the house almost burnt to the ground in an electrical fire. Rebuilt with William Turnbull's expertise, it was somewhat expanded. Maintaining the common land, trails, buildings, and landscaping is ongoing at Sea Ranch. Housing for staff, water conservation, erosion issues, and more concern the management and various homeowners committees. Recently, the central building with the post office, store, and restaurant have been refreshed. Initially, several houses had green roofs, originally called sod roofs, as they function as fire protection and insulation. Succulents are profuse and thrive on the Joneses' roof. The green roofs and a stunning contrast to the gray shingle offer a stunning contrast to the gray shingled exteriors and connect the structures to the landscape. Not to be overlooked, there are homes nestled in the forest of Sea Ranch. Wide panes of glass and skylights emit abundant light on dark days. And it does get cloudy and rainy there, despite these sunny photos. Beyond Sea Ranch, Halpern's extensive project list includes his biggest and best-known projects: Ghirardelli Square, Levi's Plaza and Market Street in San Francisco, Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis, Seattle's Freeway Park, Lovejoy Plaza, and Iris Fountain in Portland, Oregon are just a few of them. These are works of urban reclamation, but the Sierra and Yosemite were special for him and a place he often visited. In 2005, he designed Yosemite Walk that leads to Yosemite Falls. The trail is bordered by low stone walls to focus the visitor's attention on the falls. With the Portland Fountains Project, 1970, Halpern brought the massiveness of the mountains and the joy of water into this special public space. Animated by people enjoying the playfulness of the space, this project is an abstraction of a mountain landscape. His sensitivity to landscape and of community interaction is clearly demonstrated here. What do we bring to this environment and how do we alter it? I feel myself a custodian rather than an owner of it. I feel I owe constant vigilance and care for its poetic and spiritual survival. I hope those that follow feel the same. That was said in 1995. One reason for the success of Halpern's design is that he was so skilled as an observer of nature. He walked thousands of miles in California's hills and mountains, a notebook always at hand. These notebooks, there are now 250 of them, filled with vigorous ink drawings, make up a vivid artistic autobiography. Halpern's words are even more relevant today. How do we preserve open space? How do we protect the natural environment? How do we live with less? How do we consume less? His remarkable vision for Sea Ranch has impacted generations of architects, landscape architects, and seekers of a life close to nature. And I hope all of you will one day get to visit Sea Ranch if you haven't already. Thank you.